I'm an ex-USFS officer. You may have seen my previous post where I uploaded the transcript of the notebook I found of a man who was stranded in Hiawatha National Forest in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan in a blizzard. If you haven't, I'll link back to that post. When my higher-ups found out about my post, I was immediately fired. I signed a non-disclosure agreement, but I can't keep this knowledge to myself. In this post, I will upload my report that tells you all about my expedition to find the Whistler, what the Whistler actually is, and what happened to me and the men I took out with me. Report entry number 1. When I first arrived at the scene, I found a half-eaten man. He was fully nude, other than a thin blanket that was discarded to his left. I estimated that the fire had only died roughly an hour before I had arrived. The body was fresh, other than being frozen. The man was missing his heart, liver, kidneys, and stomach. His chest, thighs, calves, and neck were stripped to the bone of their meat. To his right, when I found the notebook, it described his last days on this mortal plane. When I went into his tent/shelter he built, I found the bones of his dog. He'd butchered her and used her for warmth. There was none of her meat left, so either he ate it all, or the Whistler consumed it after it finished him off. His car was completely undrivable. The tires were slashed, the windows broken, and all the wiring under the steering column was torn out. Even if he wanted to drive out of this place, he couldn't. After I informed my higher-ups, they told me that I couldn't share this information with anyone. They said that things like this just happen from time to time, that people go into the woods who are unprepared for the harsh weather, and eventually they begin to hallucinate and freeze to death, and their bodies inevitably get eaten on by scavengers. However, from what I read in his journal, it sounds like this man was well prepared. Food, water, cold-resistant gear, and fire supplies. He had them all. There were also no signs of wolves or anything of the sort. The place felt empty, like an abandoned home. The only evidence of life were the remains of both the victim and his dog. There were also strange footprints in the snow. The prints looked almost like wolf prints, but they were off, like a cross between a raccoon, a wolf, and a bear's prints. I knew I'd seen them before, so I took a few pictures to compare them to my animal footprint charts. Whatever it was enormous. The prints were a bit larger than my size 13 jungle boots, roughly a size 15, just eyeballing them. And after I gathered all this unauthorized information, I went home to study it. Report entry number 2. Victim's journal entry. The Whistler is looking right at me now. His jaws hang open as the low rings from his gullet. His enormous furry body looks so warm. I crave his embrace. His maw is ready to strike. This is my last entry in my journal. He looks so hungry. I'm so cold. Although I didn't believe it at first, after analyzing the footprints and comparing them to my charts, I decided that they belonged to an otter. In all my years of strange occurrences, including what I'm pretty sure were Bigfoot prints. I'd never seen otter prints of this size or evidence of one being bipedal. I estimated that this creature must have been at least 6'8" and 300 pounds or more. I was more confused at this point than I was when I found the campsite. I then took the details of low, high, low whistles and otters and took to the internet. That's when I decided that this beast is a kushtaka. A Wikipedia entry says kushtaka, or kushtaka, literally land otter man, are mythical shape-shifting creatures found in the folklore of the Tlingit people of the Pacific Northwest coast of North America. Physically, kushtaka are shape-shifting creatures capable of assuming human form, the form of an otter and potentially other forms. In some accounts, kushtaka is able to assume the form of any species of otter, in others, only one. Accounts of their behavior seem to conflict with one another. In some stories, kushtaka are cruel creatures who take delight in tricking poor Tlingit sailors to their deaths. It is also said that the kushtaka emit a high-pitched, three-part whistle in the pattern of low, high, low. The first question I had was if this creature was a shapeshifter. At this point, I just couldn't rule anything out. I didn't see any evidence of its prints morphing from human to otter, but hey, I'm not an expert. The second question was, what was it doing this far from the Pacific Northwest? I suppose that it wasn't impossible that over millennia they expanded their range. This was already mind-bending enough. I just had to believe that this beast was there and killed this man. Then I had to do something about it. Report entry 3. A week ago, I went back to my old headquarters. I had to sneak in because my old boss had instructed all of my old co-workers not to let me in. I managed to convince 4 of my old co-workers to hear me out. Ben, Walt, Spencer, and Eddie very graciously listened to my spiel. At first, they didn't believe me. Then I showed them all the photos I took, had them read the victim's notebook, and showed them all the research I did. These guys were no strangers to the weird and fascinating. Ben once found a random staircase in the middle of the forest that led nowhere. Walt saw what he could only explain as a giant bipedal wolf. Spencer swore up and down that once he saw Santa's sleigh flying overhead. Eddie just to join up. He was exceedingly bored and was curious about the giant otter. Wikipedia entry. Legends have it that the kushtaka can be warded off through copper, urine, dogs, and in some stories, fire. We had very little information to go on how to stay safe while searching for the kushtaka, other than sketchy Wikipedia articles. We decided to arm ourselves with everything we could. Copper was easy. All of our bullets were copper-coated, so that was no big deal. We decided to collect dog urine and a 2 birds in 1 stone situation. Harvesting was fairly straightforward, seeing as we all owned dogs except for Ben, being more of a cat guy. Fire was easy. Eddie decided that a flamethrower would be appropriate, and we agreed. We also had flares, kerosene, and lighters in case things got too hairy. We headed out on a Monday. We had every intention of staying out until we killed the beast. We just had to hope that it was an animal and not some mythical magical creature. We drove to the victim's campsite, which had been completely cleaned by our higher-ups. We set up camp and waited. Report entry number 4. Night 1 led to nothing out of the ordinary, just some forest critters wandering through our sight. We headed down to the pond that the victim described. There were no giant otter footprints, or any sign that anything had been there in an extended period of time. And granted, the victim was here in December. It's now February, so this thing could be anywhere by now. However, the forest here was surprisingly quiet, and usually means that there is a predator nearby. I had a feeling that the Pt.2 is somewhat near. The next week was the same. Nothing really happened. Night 10 brought better results. Walt had gone out that night for firewood. He heard the whistles. He said it was the most eerie sound he'd ever heard. When he got back to the tent, he was pale as a ghost and shivering like crazy. We all noticed that the temp had begun to drop. We checked the thermometer, and in a matter of an hour, the temp had gone from 15 degrees Fahrenheit to negative 12 degrees Fahrenheit. Does the Pt.2 have an effect on the temperature, or does it only strike once it decides it's cold enough? I had no idea. All I knew was that it was cold. And began hearing the whistles. Low. High, low. Victim's journal entry. It's been 4 days since the first encounter with the whistler. My ankle has swollen 5 times its usual size. Every night the whistler torments me with its constant low-high whistles. It thrashes around, breaking branches and throwing them at the tent. It won't come within 20 feet from the tent. I think it doesn't like heat or smell. Like the victim recorded, we discovered the next morning that the Pt.2 had circled our camp. A circle of giant otter tracks where it wouldn't come past 20 feet from us. Also, like in the victim's journal, our only mode of transportation has been destroyed. I was hoping that the beast wouldn't be as bold with the 5 of us here, but it seems that it doesn't fear us. Tonight, Ben has decided to post up in a tree to see if he can get a shot at the beast. We had all brought our night vision scopes, but he was the best shot. We spent the rest of the day preparing for our sneak attack. When the night approached, Ben suited up. His first 5 layers was his Kevlar body armor. The rest of us just for warmth. Unfortunately, we had underestimated the Pt.2. Port entry number 5. That night, we heard the whistles. We heard the Pt.2 crunching the snow and the twigs all around us. We had placed our hope in Ben. Suddenly, the Pt.2 stopped. It released a sound that crossed between a whistle and a growl. Then we heard 5 quick shots followed by a roar of animalistic pain. Then we heard his screams. We sat in horror as we heard Ben crying for help, begging us to help him. We heard his bones break. We heard the flesh being torn off his frame. His screams turned to grunts. His grunts turned to gurgles. And his gurgles turned to bone-chilling silence. We waited. We cried. We heard it. Low, high, low. The next morning, we found the carnage. Ben's body was twisted into grotesque shapes. His jaw was broken and morphed into an eternal plea for help. His eyes were white with frost, but they burned into our souls. His expression was of hate and accusation. His chest cavity had been cracked open. His organs were missing. Most, we assumed, had been eaten. Small intestines were strewn all about the campsite. Walt vomited. Spencer cried. Eddie was in shock. And I was furious. The next night a blizzard blew in. We decided that enough was enough. Either the Pt.2 would die, or we would die with guns blazing. If we walked out of here, the Kushtaka would pick us off one by one. If we stood and fight, we might have stood a chance. We prepared for our fight. As expected, we didn't win. Walt was the first of us to go down. The Kushtaka blindsided him like a wild boar, dragging him off into the night. We heard the squelching of his meat being rent from his bones, the screams of gurgly agony ripping out into the night. The constant low-high-low penetrating our smells were driving us mad. Spencer fell next. That was when Eddie and I finally saw the beast in full. A lumbering 7 feet-ish tall bipedal otter, claws like chef's knives, teeth like ice picks. Its jaw was slack as the whistles rang out. It was holding Spencer by the back of his neck as if he was presenting him to us. With a sickening crunch, Spencer's neck broke into the Kushtaka's paw. It then began to gnaw at Spencer's neck. Blood flowed forth like a flash flood. Eddie and I hightailed it back to the busted-up car. Before we got in, we placed road flares all around and dumped all of the dog piss onto the ground. We huddled into the car and wept. Tomorrow. We leave tomorrow, no matter what. Entry report number 6. Hello, reader. My name is Eddie. I'd like to finish this report because Brian, the one who started all this, has perished at the hands of the Kushtaka. We tried to make it back together. We hiked. As soon as the sun rose, we were hoping that the pattern of attack, the Kushtaka attacking at night, meant that we'd be safe in the daylight. We were not. The nearest town was 2 hours by car, going 60 miles per hour. By foot, it would take forever, but we didn't have any choice. It was worth a shot, though. The main road was fairly busy. That was only 45 minutes by car. If we could have made it there in time, Brian would be finishing this report. Oh, about halfway to the road, it caught us. We heard the whistles well before we saw it. I'm not sure exactly what happened to Brian, but he told me to keep going while he stayed to fight. All he kept with him was the jug of kerosene and one of the flare guns. All I know is that I'm alive because of him. The Kushtaka is still out there. Please, whatever you do, don't go looking for it. Let it be. I feel it's appropriate to end this the same way Brian did in his last post. If you're reading this, I beg you, don't go into the woods in the winter. At least not alone. And whatever you do, stay warm. This is Eddie, signing out.